But he pointed out that the great flaw of every civilization that attained immense power was they overextended their power. They went beyond their limits, transgressed their limits. And in the light of the Umayyad dynasty, which begins approximately in 661 and ends in 750, it was a very short-lived dynasty. And it's different from, say, the Abbasid dynasty, which goes from about 750 to 1258. Although the latter period, it's arguable whether or not you could really call it the Abbasid dynasty because it was so convoluted with other elements, ruling elements. And the caliphs were, in essence, much like the latter-day Roman emperors that had almost no power whatsoever. But if you look at the destruction of the Umayyads, according to Dr. Khalid Blankenship in his book, The Jihad State, he argues that in fact it was an overextended military operation that ended in failure. They could no longer sustain the expansion that was so immense at that initial phase. Now, a lot of Muslims actually pride themselves on that initial expansion. But if you look historically at that expansion, and I mean certainly it's arguable, from a secular point of view, they would reject a spiritual dimension and simply interpret it in materialistic avenues. I mean, there's no doubt that there was some driving force that can't simply be reduced to materialism. It's arguable whether that or not that was actually a positive force on the world, because if you look at the Umayyads, I mean, one of the things that they were totally uninterested in is spreading Islam. I mean, the Umayyad dynasty had no interest in converting other peoples to Islam. And during the period of the Umayyad dynasty, only about less than 15% of conquered peoples ever actually became Muslim. That is very different from the Abbasids, who were very interested in spreading Islam. And during their period, over 50% of their conquered peoples actually became Muslims. So it was a very different experience. Now, the Umayyads also demanded that if you did become Muslim, like a Jewish person, you not only had to convert to the religion, but you actually had to convert to an Arab tribe. So you not only joined a religion, but you actually joined a tribe. And a lot of Muslims aren't really aware of that little historical fact. So the Mawali system developed where if I wanted to become a Muslim, I became a Mawla, which is really a derogatory term, although it does have its opposite meaning because it's from a linguistic branch of words known as the al-dadad, which are words that mean one thing and its opposite. So Mawla is a servant, but it's also a master. It also means somebody who's in protection, and that was obviously the meaning of the people that were converting. They were the Mawali. But it was still seen as a derogatory term, and the proof of that is that Imam Malik, radiallahu anhu, considered it an egregious insult that he was called a Mawla of the Yemeni tribe that he was from, as opposed to being actually from that lineage. So it was seen, without any doubt, as a second-class status amongst the early Arabs. Now, this military expansion of the Umayyads was, according to them, fulfilling this command to go out and subdue the world and to subdue it to the power of Islam, the might of Islam. And they believed that they were promised dominion and success over all the peoples of the earth. And that was very much, I think, part of their doctrine. Well, that was not adopted by the Abbasids. And I think it's very important for Muslims to consider the fact that those civilizations that took this version of Islam as their version of Islam had very short-lived societies. Very short-lived societies. They basically came to end within 100 years, which is what Ibn Khaldun says is the average period of the strength of a civilization. The Abbasids, on the other hand, did not. Well, they introduced several things that were not there before, like the concept of Dar al-Sulh, that it's actually wise to have good diplomatic relations with peoples. Now, there are Muslim scholars that actually believe that that's only a strategy, a short-term strategy. And you shouldn't extend that like the Quran gives 10 years. You shouldn't extend it beyond 10 years and then a new treaty is made. So there are a lot of fuqaha, and you will find this in the books, that actually say this is all strategies, that what the Muslims really want is global domination. This is what they want. They want global domination. And this is what a lot of the people that are attacking Islam today are attacking it based on this version of Islam, which is a version. I mean, I cannot deny that because I've read enough in the books to see that that version does exist. However, there are alternative versions of Islam. In other words, there are madhabs. There are ways of interpreting things. And those other versions and understandings are actually authoritative. They have their scholars, they have their promoters. I mean, it's interesting that Ibn Taymiyyah himself was of the belief that all jihad was defensive. You see, there are many scholars who say, no, jihad has an offensive element, and it's absolutely acceptable for Muslims to go out on an offensive jihad and an obligation to go out twice a year, for instance, to conquer new lands, conquer new peoples. This is one version. Ibn Taymiyyah said that every single example of the Prophet ﷺ's campaigns, including the campaign to Tabuk, which if you read in Sahih al-Bukhari, it's pointed out that they were actually given information that it was the Byzantines